I called it the murder house. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask some quick fire round questions. In your opinion, what's the biggest myth about estate agents that isn't true?
Biggest myth, okay. Probably that we're just there to open doors and let people around houses, when actually there's so much more to being an estate agent. I think, I've had to morph into being there for clients in different ways, whether it be emotionally, whether it be just being someone to listen to at the other end of the phone, whether it be being part of their big move and their big journey and almost becoming part of their family, which is
Definitely.
crazy to say.
Yeah.
And I think it's a misconception that agents don't really do too much as their involvement in part of the process, but actually we're there right from day one all the way to the end, and sometimes even helping sellers move into their properties, which I've done a few times, and I'm sure you have as well.
I think the difference is, and I always kind of talk about this through my journey as well. Unfortunately, estate agents, as we know, are tarnished with a bit of a bad brush, and I think every industry will account for the same basis. There's the good and the bad, and there's the ugly, and that is just in any industry, and it will always happen. There are so many phenomenal agents out there who care so much for their clients that they will pick up the phone at 8 o'clock in the evening in their own time. If they get messaged on a Sunday that they need a call, they'll make a call on a Sunday. If they need a wardrobe moved out, they'll go and do that. And there's just so many people, agents out there, and we know a lot of them, and we're very fortunate within both of our brands that we have that caliber of people who, in truth, they care. They care about their clients, they care about their journey. So I think it's quite unfair in a lot of circumstances, because as you say, there's the therapy aspect. There could be someone who's unfortunately lost their mother. There's someone who's super excited because they're a first time buyer. There's someone who's getting the house repossessed. The variables that are there, and we're dealing with the biggest financial assets that they own. It's not a boat, it's not a car, it's not a pair of trainers. It's a whopping great house that is worth a lot of money. And people really underestimate sort of the responsibility and duty that we have as agents to look after that process. And I'm not saying, everyone's perfect, because, it's obviously not the case, but there are still, and to be clear, plenty of agents out there who will go the extra mile and do everything they can for their client. Yeah.
What's the craziest story you could tell us behind a house that you were part of selling?
Well, back in 1764, no, only joking. I've got a good one for this. So, a little bit of story. I'm not going to mention too many details here because that's the right thing to do. But I called it the murder house. So there was this property in this particular area, and there was a lot of noise going around a murder that took place. And actually the murder took place in this property. And I was quite a little bit unknowing of it because it was slightly out of my area. I was obviously a little bit taken back, but at the same time, the house still needed to be represented, and the client still needed to be looked after. And you know me, I like challenges. So I thought to myself, okay, well, this is definitely going to be an interesting one. Probably hadn't quite got it in my brain to how I'm going to strategize it. But one thing I definitely knew I was going to be is transparent and honest about the whole situation. So I valued the property. And he looked at me and he was quite pleasantly surprised, and he said, even take into account what's taking place? I said, yeah, because there are going to be people out there who are going to see the property for what it has to offer, and their view on what's taking place here, which I'm sure they'll read in the news because it started to hit all the newspapers and stuff like that, is they'll take a view on it, and end of the day it's their decision to do so. So I controlled the whole situation. So I took on the house, I took it on the market. Within 2 weeks, I had sold the property for full asking price. And the couple who had brought it, they had a completely unique understanding of the situation, and they made their decisions and they bought it. So client was super impressed. And actually, since then, I know the clients. I've kept in contact with them. I went out to see them 3 years ago, valued their property for them, and they love it. I'm having a great time there.
That's a pretty intense story, with a really nice outcome at the end of it. And out of interest, how did you, on the actual viewing, I guess,
deal with that situation.
Present the information.
Yeah. I told everyone, because we had quite a few inquiries about it, because it was under market value, but it was attractively priced to draw in attention. And I was very open with absolutely everyone. I wasn't going to be around the bush and told what's going on. But a lot of people said, I appreciate the upfront honesty, but not for me. And then some people said, yeah, well, look, I'll still come and see it. I know what I'm coming into on that front. And interestingly, everyone said, well, if you can sell the murder house, there ain't going to be a house that you can't sell. So that set the tone.
That's a great line. That's a really crazy story. I've never heard that before. One of my questions is, what's the funniest excuse you've had for the reason why a buyer has pulled out of a property transaction?
Interesting. Well, actually, on this front, I have 2 examples of this.
Okay.
But the best one has to be because of the toilet roll holders. So basically, there was a fixture and fittings list, and the client decided, so the vendor selling the property decided that he wasn't going to leave the toilet roll holders. So the ones that are mounted to the wall, they're £3 a pop.
Wow.
Buyer saw this, had enough of that, didn't accept it, and basically said, I'm withdrawing from the property on the basis of them doing that. So that was pretty crazy. And then the other one, which was interesting, was the manhole cover situation. So took this chappie around a property, we went out in the garden, there's a manhole there, as most gardens do have. We looked at the manholes, said there's a manhole. I said, don't worry about it. He says, no, I agree. Went through all the process and compliance, and then went to transactional, and then a few weeks down the line says, I'm going to pull out with the manhole cover. It's like, why did you even start all of this? So yeah, they're 2 interesting ones. But 20 odd years doing this, there's a million stories that will just absolutely baffle and blow your mind. Because in truth, we're dealing with Joe Public, and there's all variations of life out there. We have to adjust for them, most certainly. But the reasons or the crazy reasons will never stop coming.